Guys, excited to see you guys here. I hope everyone is doing well. As you can see, my voice is a little hoarse, but I have water. And if you guys ever need anything clarified because I'm not coming out as clear as I want to, feel free to type it up in the chat and we can go from there. Perfect. So we'll give it, I would say, another minute just to see if anybody else comes in, and then we will jump right in.
I don't know how to respond to that.
So if you guys were with me with the last masterclass, there were some typos. I think I did a better job of catching them, but again, I will go through the last part. I did a lot of talk to text just because I had a baby with me the whole time. So I will go through and make sure that to clean this up in case anything is incredibly noticeable and bad. And I just want you to be able to go back and look at it and understand what I was trying to say. So, all right, so let's just jump in. And this is plotting your romance. And we are going to talk about primarily characters across the same series. I know that we did get a question about how to connect characters in like standalone series or a series with standalones. Um, and I just wanted to touch on that right now, really quick, because we are going to focus primarily on, like I said, same couples. Um, but just really quick, great ways to connect. Very, very popular are a group of brothers, a group of sisters, a group of siblings. Small town, you could kind of do it, but it usually works best if there's some kind of thing uniting them together. For me, it's a hockey team. So I would write about people on a hockey team. Um, it could be like a unit if you're military or heroes, police, firefighters. It could also be like a security firm if you're doing romantic suspense, just that sort of thing. And that'll connect. You'll have good connection that way. All right, but let's go through here and let's jump in. Okay, so if you were here with my last class, this slide is going to look familiar to you. The majority of these slides are all new, but there were a couple that works both ways. So I just wanted to include them here, especially since we're planning a series for the most part, and we need to get important information. So series rely on branding, on your author branding, and those things should be consistent and clear. So the things that I like to ask myself when I start a new series, how many books, how many words per book per chapter? So that could be I want 50,000 words total and I want 25 chapters, so that's about 2,000 words per chapter. And that consistency will reflect your brand and your readers will start to know what to expect. Points of views. Are you going to write your just a single point of view, dual point of view between the hero and the heroine? Usually, if we're talking about specific romance, you're not really going to see an antagonist unless you're doing something where romance is more of a subplot, so like a fantasy or a science fiction. But for the most part, you're going to get at least one point of view from the heroine's perspective, usually two. It depends on your genre. First or third person, again, this is genre dependent, but usually you can get away with either or. um, Tropes and what your intended release schedule or what you would want your release schedule to be. So once you have this, you can now start figuring out how you're going to start developing the romance between your characters. So I want to take this time just as of right now to discuss genre. So, like I said, we're going to be discussing series with the same characters. Very rarely will you find a contemporary romance series longer than a trilogy with the same characters. This usually includes mafia, bully, etc. So, even the dark romance. Now, maybe you'll have, like as I say down here, so anything contemporary romance, consider maybe a duet or a trilogy, but pepper in those characters, those side characters, and then you can unite them with another duet or a trilogy. And so you might see some crossover with characters, but primarily you're not going to see anything like a six book romance series, that sort of thing. But however, in fantasy and science fiction mysteries, you can draw out romance because it's a secondary plot. So this is where you can start seeing longer fiction or longer series, and even paranormal romance, depending on what you're writing or what your plot is, you could potentially have more than three books with that same character. Um, I know that for urban fantasy, especially, and this is what I write with one pen name that sorry, my kids are outside. But anyway, so with paranormal um romance or urban fantasy, there is a subgenre of urban fantasy that is urban fantasy romance where you have the romance and the urban fantasy part like 50-50. Like it's hard to separate both things. So basically what the site is essentially saying is just know your genre, and know that contemporary romance you're not really going to see longer than a trilogy, just because it's difficult for I mean, even you or even a reader, to continue to be interested in a couple or in a series without it being too contrived or forced. Okay, so let's discuss some very popular tropes. Now, what I like to do with romance is I mean, everyone's going to be different on how you get your characters versus your plot, right? Sometimes your plot will come to you, sometimes your characters will come to you. But we can start figuring out, okay, what kind of tropes do you want? Because once we figure out a trope, each trope has particular expectations, right? And with those tropes, we can start figuring out how to start plotting them out. So, enemies to lovers is extremely popular. The one caveat with enemies to lovers is make it make sorry. If you have two people who get annoyed with each other at an office because they keep eating other's food or whatever, that's not really an enemies to lovers, you know. It could be like hate love kind of relationship. But when we're talking enemies, we're talking about like, I don't like you or I am predisposed to hate you. So a vampire and a vampire slayer, Romeo and Juliet, if you want to get that way. Um, it could be in Dark Mafia, two people from two different syndicates. So that sort of thing. If you're looking at just contemporary, because I know contemporary is a difficult one, it could be you guys do not like each other for whatever reason. Maybe they dated and he broke her heart and they hate each other. They could come from One comes from a rich family, one comes from a poor family. Maybe the parents are rivals and that has trickled down to the kids, stuff like that. Obviously, next is friends to lovers. And we all know that they're friends, they develop into something more. And then insta love. Insta love is where you fall in love or lust, depending, basically right away. Um, you have slow burn, which I really like, where you kind of draw out the romance. And especially if you're going to be doing like a series, this might be one you kind of look at more into because it makes things more realistic. And I know that that's a few comments I saw in the forum where you guys want to make your love story realistic. One that isn't on here, but is also emerging and very popular is the He Falls First. And it's kind of goes with Insta love. It obviously depends on when he falls in particular, but usually, since we see a lot of romances from the female perspective, we think that she's the one who has the feelings and he might be standoffish. In truth, we there's a big kind of surge for this he falls first, and we'll start seeing it through action, through words, and even maybe through his perspective, right? So just keep tropes in mind after you have your metadata and your genre, those genre expectations, to start thinking about that. So after you have that, like, okay, are they enemies, are they friends, and is this insta love or is this slow burn? You want to start, now we're going to narrow it down even more. Okay, second chance, forced proximity, forbidden romance. Is it fake dating or marriage? Secret baby. For dark romance or dark mafia, is she trying to infiltrate the syndicate? So mistaken identity, right? Um, or is she an FBI informant? Is she like I said, the unrequited love or the star-crossed lovers, do they come from 2 different syndicates? That sort of thing. Um, so the reason I had those, kind of the I don't wanna say the basic, but, like, it's kind of like this, pyramid, right? So, like, you start with, let's say, enemies to lovers, slow burn, and now from there, you can be like, "Okay, I'm gonna have it be forbidden romance and forced proximity." Because once you start adding to your tropes, again, your structure and your particular plot points that you have to hit based on your genre and reader expectations, that's where this is going to start coming from. Um, so you can have second chance romance with enemies to lovers. Second chance is actually a reason why they could become enemies. Like, it could be a high school sweetheart thing and they break up and it was really bad and now they hate each other. You never know. So that's why I like to start with those basic foundation tropes and now I'm going to add on to it. So again, now we can start structuring the romance. Remember your genre and reader expectations. And you can apply this as a main romance structure or as a subplot. So whether you're doing like a science fiction with a romantic subplot, it's very important to have, if your romance is going to be a subplot, it's important to plot out your regular, let's say your cozy, right? Plot out your mystery and make sure you weave your romance into it and make sure that it makes sense within your plot. And that is something that we will go into further. But just know that it's helpful to think of romance as something separate from your main plot if it's going to be secondary, because that's going to help you hit those romantic beats without kind of like you're merging it with the main plot and then things kind of get sticky because you're just like, am I raising the tension if my plot is over here and my romance is here? And I know everyone wants to try to be as tightly plotted as possible, even if you're a pantser. Okay, so again, this might seem like a familiar slide because it is, but structure is incredibly important. So this is my 8 point plot structure. This is what I do at the very basic of whether I just want to get something down and start writing, or whether I want to get something down because the characters can't stop talking to me, and then I flesh it out into a more detailed outline. So I just wanted to break down what each point was. So we have the inciting incident. This is our normal life, our mundane life. Something maybe weird happens, but it doesn't change your day to day. So, your heroine moves to a small town. Harry receives a letter to Hogwarts, or someone breaks up with her boyfriend. The trigger, the call to adventure, persists, right? So that weird thing, it's not going away. And we can keep pretending that our life is still normal, but it has slowly started to change. So your hero is either forced or he chooses to step into this new world, right? So she decides to solve a murder. Harry decides to go to Hogwarts. She decides to get a job with her ex, who happens to be a billionaire after breaking up with her pathetic boyfriend. So surprises are also plot twists, just something to increase that tension, to hit the beat where you made the decision to go to Hogwarts, and now, oh, Harry, turns out Harry's super rich and he has this huge bank account, and he is now in a world of witches and wizards, right? And that's kind of mild, right? It's like, okay, you always want to make sure that your plot twists increase in tension as you go throughout your story. So if it's romance, it could be something mild like a kiss. It could get a little bit further where maybe feelings start to develop. Now, when I say mild, spicy, steamy, this is not just talking about physical sex, okay? This is talking about emotional as well. So your black moment in romance, this is technically the breakup. But as you will find out as we continue, I don't like breakups because they can be so contrived. If your reader is reading a romance, we all know that the characters are going to get together at the end. Unless a breakup or a separation makes sense, we don't want to mess with our readers because they know that the characters are going to get together. So why are we keeping them apart, right? Our readers are smart. We don't want to, be condescending, and we don't want to play the stupid back and forth game. So don't worry, we're going to talk about potential ways to either keep characters apart because of the plot, or how to replace a breakup with other tension that can continue to raise the stakes essentially across your romantic series. So your climax, obviously, it's the highest point or the most tension point in within your novel, and your resolution is the wrap up. Okay. All right. So, how do we apply this to a romance? Once we have a structure, we can start applying romance to that structure. For example, your inciting incident will always be your meet cute. Even with second chance romance, this is where your characters will meet each other again, right? So, if they have that history and they haven't seen each other in 7 years, this is where they will meet again. Okay, but Heather, what about friends to lovers? If you can show them in conflict that makes sense with the story, this is what I compel you to do. Because you're not going to have that same meet cute if you are writing an established relationship, right? And I don't mean relationship romantic, I mean a platonic relationship. For example, a regular romance could see your hero picking your heroine up from a bad date, potentially. It could be that they're studying for an exam. Maybe they are practicing with each other. Um, an urban fantasy could show two agents, partners chasing down a rogue werewolf, and we see how well they work together. We see a lot of witty banter. Witty banter is always a favorite with readers, and it always establishes a tight knit, relationship. Maybe he calls her sweetheart and she punches him in the shoulder because she hates it. He always teases her about her boyfriend or her date or whatever. And we can see that he cares about her maybe a little bit more than friends. And she feels comfortable with him because maybe she will talk about, oh, my sister's getting married to this guy I don't like. Can you come with me to the wedding just as a friend, or to give me that support, whatever, you know? So, this is how we can kind of show an established relationship at the beginning of the story, without that usual meet cute. Okay. So trigger can be anything, but it is a sudden change in the relationship. Okay. So I have some examples here. It could be two friends get drunk, have sex, and wake up married. It could mean two enemies are forced to work together to solve a murder. It could mean our heroine's hookup turns out to be her best friend's older brother who just got back from a tour in the Marines. something changes or something is revealed that changes a relationship. Okay. And this, if you think about it, it's that call to adventure because it is something that shocks them and their perception of what they thought was a relationship is forced to change. If suddenly she thinks her professor is hot, the dynamic has changed. Maybe not on his end, but on her end, because suddenly she realizes, oh, this is a new world because now I have to figure out how to navigate around him, if that makes any sense. So your first plot twist, your first surprise, it can be a first date. It can be a first investigation the two have together. It can be a meeting to get to know each other and get their story straight if they're going to pretend to be married or pretend to date. It could be a positive pregnancy test after a hookup. Again, it could be bickering, bantering. Maybe the breast detective to telling the amateur sleuth she needs to back off, or that the amateur sleuth realizes that she is the prime suspect for a murder, something like that. But we see sort of like a reaction to that abrupt change, and it's another shock, obviously, but something that blends in with that trigger, but elevates it slightly to a degree. So, your next plot twist, your next surprise, again, this is all dependent upon genre and how many books you're writing with your particular couple. So, it could be a kiss, it could be sex, it could be something that brings them closer together. There's also some new conflict. Maybe an ex comes back into the picture. There's a new date, like a heroine has a crush, and the crush finally notices the heroine. Maybe a boyfriend wants to get serious. If it's an urban fantasy, maybe they train together. They have to physically do something together, like they have to practice physical combat, maybe weapons training. For a cozy or a mystery, another investigation where they're taking a risk. So maybe they have to sneak into a house or break into a car or something like that. But their relationship, they're starting to get closer together. Even in enemies to lovers, right? They're forced to work together. And this is going to help establish trust. So your next surprise, and this is going to be the the most tense one before we drop down to the black moment. Again, sex. Usually I will have sex here or surprise two for a contemporary romance with different couples across the books. Um, Now, if you're doing sort of like an insta love across a trilogy, okay, you might want to consider having sex around here because your readers will expect it based on that particular trope. Um, you always want to increase tension though. So if you have sex in your like second plot twist, this needs to be more intense. So it could mean something that inspires emotional feelings. So maybe the sex now inspires like, oh, I completely see him in a different way. So I am starting to fall for them. I'm getting maybe possessive or jealous of any potential threats to this new relationship that I may or may not want to pursue. um like I said, like an ex, maybe she finds out that she's up for a new job. Again, the crush, like after having sex with our hero, the crush suddenly is interested in her and now she's confused about what she really wants. Okay, so black moment, this is the lowest point in the relationship again, but it doesn't have to be a breakup. Breakups can feel contrived even in a standalone romance in a series. Okay, so sometimes I use the black moment as the realization that they have feelings because now they have to make a choice between their old life, that comfort, that safety where they get to pretend that, oh, I don't need love, or I don't need a man, or I don't want a relationship. Okay. Um, but it's sort of, or do they take a risk and follow their heart? So the black moment isn't always a breakup. It could be a really, really impossible choice. It could be just something that causes conflict and like the point of no return, almost like now that this is happening and I realize it, I can't go back and pretend that I only see him as a friend. And that's scary. It's like a scary thing. So, some examples I have are, maybe the baby mama wants to come back into, the surprise baby's life. So, if you have that surprise baby and, your billionaire is getting used to being a dad and he's getting close to, the babysitter, that living in-house babysitter that he's hired. It's almost like they're a family. They're starting to get some routine established, and perhaps they've already had sex. Feelings are starting to come from this. And then all of a sudden, the ex comes back and is like, oh, I healed my illness, or oh, I completed rehab, or I did something. I came back from my travels, or I realized the job, I didn't want the job, but now I want to be back in my child's life. Okay. In an urban fantasy, they could potentially argue over a suspect, or the hero does something reckless, like sneak into a suspect's house and nearly gets caught, causing a huge fight between the hero because our hero is worried. And so he lashes out. Maybe he calls her incompetent. Maybe he questions her ability to actually do the job that she was hired to do. And this is a black moment for her because she's just trying to establish herself within this agency, or his approval means a lot. And so when he does the opposite, when he tells her to her face, no, you don't deserve this job because you just did something incredibly foolish, she is going to internalize that. But in truth, he's only lashing out because he cares about her and she did something stupid. In a dark mafia, it could mean that the heroine was kidnapped or attacked. Anything that forces the characters to realize their feelings are very different than what they initially believed. So that's where that impossible choice comes from. That's where that point of no return. They've realized something, or they have to choose between something. And now that they realized it, or now that they make that choice, they cannot go back to what happened before. They can't go back to the inciting incident. They have to move forward. So your climax, every time I think of like climax in a romance, I always think of in Love Actually, that like airport scene. He's trying to chase after her before she's off to America. Um, but you can make it unique to you in your book. Essentially, the characters realize that they care about each other and they do something about it. Again, if your romance is a subplot, maybe they're fighting a bad guy or solving a mystery right now or whatever else, but they're doing it together. Um, so the external climax is the crescendo of your main plot. The feelings surge internally as well, and the resolution. So again, um, I have them get together with the standalone romance. However, if an author tells me, okay, this is going to be a trilogy with the same characters, I will always tack on a cliffhanger that they can choose whether to use it or not. But I will always tack one on based on their genre, their brand, and where they see their characters going or developing together. And we'll talk more about climaxes later, or not climaxes. Sorry. We'll talk more about um, cliffhangers later on. I have a whole section dedicated to them. Um, But wait, what if we're writing a trilogy with the same characters? It can be so dramatic. Okay. So these are important questions to ask yourself if you are writing a series, a romance series. Okay, because even if it seems like these are the same things or might happen within the same space, they are not. So I will read out the questions, but then we're going to go into more depth and potentially figure out where we can place these, because except sex, usually every other question needs to be answered within your series. And the only reason I have sex left out potentially is because if you're writing sweet, if you're writing cozy, you don't need sex or it's closed door. Okay. So based on the metadata that you have, you need to figure out When are your characters going to get together? It could be, oh, my characters are going to get together at some point in book one. You don't need specific details, but as long as you know how many books you're writing and whether are you doing insta love? Are you doing enemies to romance? Are you doing slow burn? Whatever you're doing, right? You need to figure out when they're getting together because this is going to help you. Again, these questions are going to help you with your structure. So, when are your characters going to have sex for the first time? When are your characters going to realize they love each other? When are your characters going to tell each other how they feel? Again, that's different than realizing that you love somebody. And what conflicts do they need to have to keep readers reading, to keep the relationship grounded, but to ensure that readers don't feel the romance is stereotypical, cliche, or contrived or stale? Okay. So, again, that last point we're going to talk about together. So, don't worry. So, when should my characters get together? Again, very vague. Again, all dependent on your genre, which doesn't help you. But here are some suggestions or ideas. If you're writing a contemporary romance, paranormal romance, mafia, fantasy, or any other romance heavy story where the romance is at least 50% of the plot or as important, right? Your characters should get together at some point in book one, okay? Because that is what your readers will expect. So even if you're writing a slow burn billionaire romance, they're going to want to see, um, and get can be a very vague as well. It can tie into an established relationship or it can be sex, but something needs to happen that unites these characters and links them romantically. Okay. And this is for primarily like a contemporary romance. Um, and we also see it with very, very heavy romance heavy paranormal romance sort of thing. Um, However, if you're writing urban fantasy, like fantasy, cozy, something that's more drawn out, consider a slow burn. Unless, of course, they hook up at the beginning, realize they're not in a good position to be together, and then fight feelings for the rest of the series. So, that is an exception to that slow burn rule. You can still make a hookup, a post hookup slow burn, but just make it make sense for the story. Always make sure that you're serving the story. Okay. Um, So again, like I said, remember your metadata, how many books you're going to have, and this will help you figure out when you want your characters to get together, to hook up, to show some kind of established connection in some way. So when will my characters have sex? And this will be dependent upon whether you're sweet and steamy. Even if you write closed door, now this is important. So even if you write closed door sex, you still need to know when this happens because getting physical with someone is a big change. And that is an important part and should be plotted or thought about at least if you're a pantser. It's a huge point of tension, especially if you're writing a romance first book. You do not have to have sex at the climax. Made a little joke there. Happy Friday, everybody. Um, like I said, you can use it as an inciting incident for a secret baby romance. It can be a trigger for an unknown identity, like, ooh, the hookup turns out to be the professor. Um, it can be the first surprise for a friends with benefits type of relationship. So, maybe you have that friends with, the friends to lovers. They decide they want to start having sex because they're not getting it anywhere else and they trust each other. And then, bam, that they work out all the details before it happens. So, your first plot twist is the sex. It could even be the third surprise because things have been building up to that moment. So this is where if you're looking at structure within that first book, you can have sex. Um, it's just, and again, these are just suggestions. But what if you're writing a slow burn series? Again, look at your metadata and figure out when the best time for sex to take place is. Okay. For example, in my Shadows of Wonderland saga, which is a fairy tale, urban fantasy romance, um, There are 6 books to it. My characters don't have sex until book 4, and they don't officially confess their feelings until the last book. So there's no required order of how to figure all of this stuff out as long as it makes sense for the story. Okay. Um, we're going to look at examples of structuring romance, but for very briefly, within this Shadows of Wonderland saga, it was very enemies to lovers, but it's forced proximity. So they have to work on a case together. And so in the first 3 books, you see them developing a relationship. So they start out as they kind of have to trust each other and they help each other out. So if he found information that's going to help her case, he would give it to her. So in the second book, you're going to build on that trust, right? They already have a somewhat established relationship. They know each other at this point. So they're going to start learning more about each other, maybe going on a deeper level, getting a little bit more not as superficial as maybe book 1. And book 3, I think, is when they kiss for the first time. And it's at a very, very point of tension. So they think that they're going to be attacked or die or something. And, that adrenaline is coursing through them. Book 4 is when, they have sex. There's clear attraction from the very beginning, despite it being enemies to lovers, however. So they have sex at book 4. Book 5 it's almost like a reaction book, right? They just had sex. Now, what are they going to do about it? And that's what they're taking the fifth book to figure out as part of their subplot, not the main plot, because they have another mystery to solve. um, More of like a okay, I'm going to react to this. Okay. And not only that, how do I feel about this? And in book 6, that's when they decide that they want to be together, they confess their feelings, and everything sort of wraps up. So that's how I structured that sort of urban fantasy romance. But the reason I'm explaining this is because sex came before confession of feelings. Okay. And that's how I planned it, because I didn't want the romance to be too contrived. I wanted it to be realistic. And I also wanted it to not overshadow the main plot. And I wanted their romance to develop the characters themselves. I didn't want it to be just, well, I know romance sells, so I have to force it. And that's going to hurt you in the long run if you try to force a romance, because your readers will be able to tell, no, for sure. Okay, when will my characters realize they love each other? This is very different than telling the partner, that they love each other. The realization adds conflict internally and externally, especially if they are friends and don't want to ruin the relationship, or they have an unequal dynamic. So it could be a detective and the partner, or the rookie, professor student, boss assistant, or they're supposed to be enemies, right? So when it comes to this particular part of your structure for your romance, you need to consider believability, right? Unless you're doing insta love, it's really important that readers believe your character is falling for the hero. What makes her love him? Is it his soft spot for animals? And examples of this that you can utilize in your own fiction: The Punisher, John Wick. Is it him being a grandma's boy? Is it his protectiveness, his loyalty, his humor? Why does she start falling for him? Um, I always like it when the hero has a soft spot for the heroine, right? Um, I just think that having a little bit of protectiveness, but usually I'll write that imbalance of power, or the older guy, younger girl. And even if they're enemies, there's that obligation to protect someone younger or smaller, or um, someone young, like in a less powerful position than I am. And so that is already natural. And I can sort of now tease it out because of that power imbalance, right? Okay. So, what about enemies to lovers or bully? How can I make that believable? This is a huge question I get asked all the time. Number one, attraction. We can hate someone we're attracted to. I'm sure we all have someone that we absolutely hate and that we just are like, God, I hate that he's so cute. Um, Hate is an excellent conflict, tension, and it just adds the right amount of spice when they're gorgeous, right? Save the cat. What can your enemy do to soften your readers to him? Uh, if you've seen Ted Lasso and you know Roy, he is just like, he is the definition of grump, right? A grumpy character. But he has that soft spot for his niece, and that warms everybody to him. Why do they love to be around each other? If it's forced proximity, do they work together? Are they forced to live together? Um, be forcing your characters to be around each other, they have to start seeing them in a different way. You can't hate someone that you're forced to work with. I mean, you can, like, let's be real. But this is why a lot of one of the like tropes, I don't know if it's still as big, but like in the early 2000s was, oh, just go in the closet and make out or figure out your issue or whatever. It's because you have a really small space and you're forced to work out your issues. So forced proximity is kind of like an extension of that. And then another suggestion is one of them has to bend, right? Think of Beauty and the Beast, the wolves and the library. So when she escapes, he chooses to save her. He doesn't have to, right? I mean, he kind of invested in her if you want to think about it that way, but he didn't have to save her from the wolves, but he does. And he puts himself at risk and he gets pretty badly hurt because of it. And then she, because I'm really big on cause and effect, she heals him, which she doesn't have to do. She has that opportunity to leave him there, even though he saved her. She could have left him there and escaped, but she chooses not to. She goes and she brings him back to the castle. She heals him up. And from that point on, they start seeing each other differently. So you can utilize that thing too, especially if you're doing like a paranormal romance, especially if you're doing even a bully romance. Um, that is how to start helping them see each other in a different way when they have the opportunity to fuck that person over and they choose not to. It could be your heroine knows a huge secret that would just ruin the hero who's a bully, and she just chooses not to say anything. So, those are points to keep in mind. Okay, so when are your characters going to tell each other that they love each other? Besides sex, this is a huge point of internal conflict in a romance first plot. And by romance first, I hope you know I mean like if romance is tacked onto your genre, so paranormal romance, contemporary romance, small town romance, anything, even to a degree, urban fantasy romance, where romance is incredibly important. So remember, once this happens, there's no going back. Okay. Once they tell each other, they cannot swallow that back up. You can't pretend it didn't happen. The only extenuating circumstances to this is if they're drunk, if one of them is inhibited, or if they think they're about to die. Then you can use the adrenaline, the drugs, the alcohol, whatever, as an excuse. But again, you're not going backwards because the perception of each other has changed. Even if you try to be like, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to do that, you know? So it's a really important moment and it needs to be time. I don't want to say perfectly. We can be messy. It's okay. But it is important to think about because you can't go back from that. So, things that you have to ask yourself. And I know I have you guys asking yourself a lot of questions. That's because not only are genre and reader expectations different, but your brand is different too. And so, a lot of these decisions are going to be very subjective. Um, so, things to ask yourself: have I developed physical and emotional attraction that's believable? Do my characters respect and trust each other? And can my characters be their true selves without worry with each other? Right? So, like, if you're doing a grumpy sunshine romance, like, I always think, like, You ever watch that Beetlejuice cartoon, like back from I think it was the early 90s? And obviously, we're not talking about anything romantic because Lydia is like, I think in middle school or something at that time. But Beetlejuice was very like grumpy, and Lydia would sort of like be that light or that sunshine. I know a lot of people are saying, like, in the current day Wednesday, she has her best friend who does that for her. Again, Roy and Keely. Keely is super, like, I think of her like Elwoods, right? Like, she's super positive, she's bubbly, and Roy is the complete opposite. So those are like my favorite things. But um, Keely can be her bubbly self. And even though it's in complete contrast to Roy, he's not going to make fun of her for it. He's not going to make her feel bad or guilty. I know that there was this meme like where it's like you're a really shitty person if you make someone feel bad for something they're really excited about. So just keep that in mind when you're writing your characters. If your character is super into anime or if they love Disneyland, even as a 33-year-old adult, does your partner or does your hero make fun of them or criticize them or ridicule them? So that's what I mean by, can your characters be who they are with each other? Um, and if you're writing like a dark romance, right? Um, can your hero be as brutal, as rough, as ruthless in front of the heroine? Like, I always think, because of House of Dragon, right? Damon literally, spoiler alert, I'm just gonna say it, the first season has been out, like, since last year, so I think it's safe. Like, Damon, Matt Smith, literally slices somebody into pieces in front of everybody for calling his wife a whore, okay? Like, those are the vibes I want in my book boyfriend. But what I'm essentially saying is that, he's ruthless and he wasn't afraid to do that in front of his wife because she accepts who he is. Now, is this toxic and is this unhealthy? Of course, but we're here, we're talking about fiction. This is like a safe space to talk about things like that because readers love that. Readers love that. Um, so it's not just can the heroine be comfortable, but can the hero, if your hero is, um, you know, um, a vampire, can he be a vampire? And it doesn't have to be that because Keely accepts Roy for who he is, right? She's not going around saying, "Oh, why are you such a downer? You need to think more positive." You know, she accepts him and he feels comfortable being himself with her. So based on those three questions, have you shown things, like, have you shown these things that make it clear to the reader that you have an emotional arc that's developed? So if you said yes to everything, then this is when you can start thinking about when they can tell each other how they feel. Okay. Um, and you might say, okay, but what about friends to lovers, right? Again, you still have to establish that they're physically and emotionally attracted to each other. Um, Now you can build all of this up for friends to lovers in a couple of in a couple of chapters, right? Taylor Swift did this in her "You Belong with Me" video, right? But the biggest point of conflict for friends to lovers is if you confess or if you hook up, will the friendship be ruined? And that's what holds them back. So therein goes that internal conflict. And you can even ask yourself an extra question of, if I confess now, right here, is that going to strengthen the relationship or is it going to hurt the relationship? If she just broke up with her boyfriend and he's over here like, "Oh, I love you," that's not going to help. You now have to establish a new relationship together of, okay, of now the boyfriend's out of the picture because she's going to be changed, right? Relationships transform us, even the shitty ones. And so he has to realize that he has to start over. Yeah, maybe he's still physically attracted to her, but he's not sure if he's going to be emotionally attracted to her. And if, she did questionable things with the boyfriend, maybe if she stopped talking to him, now she has to earn that respect and trust back. So relationships change all the time, even if you have that friends to lovers. So more things to consider. Again, what is at risk? So this is kind of what we just talked about. Do they risk ruining a friendship? If he's a professor, even a former one, could he risk his job? What about her reputation? What if people start thinking she only got good grades because she's sleeping with the professor? Well, people start thinking, okay, I just said that. um, and then ask yourself, what is that risk if they don't tell each other? Will he lose her to a rival or a job? Will she think she's being used and moved on? Are they about to go into battle and they might not get a chance to say it to each other afterwards? Um, what if it's just a distraction to keep her from doing something reckless? Um, just things to think about. Okay, avoiding the cliche, the dreaded cliche. When we think of cliche in romance, what comes up? Okay, for me, we're going to go into some rants here, so buckle up. Ross and Rachel, which was a hugely divisive couple, right? You have Bella and Edward, Ron and Hermione, Harry and Ginny. I'm sure you guys have your own ships where you're just like, how the hell did they become canon? Or how did they get together? What were the writers thinking? Why did they develop their relationship in this way? Um, we want to make sure that your readers are obsessed with your hero and rooting for your heroine and not shipping her with her mentor or her teacher. That's me the majority of the time. I'm like, why the hell? Why is Leia simping over here for freaking Leia? Geez, no. Natalie Portman, Padma, I think. Why is Padma over here simping for Hayden Christensen when Ewan McGregor is right there? Like, I don't understand. So, like, you don't want your readers to be like, why is her character with this whiny baby? Like, why not go for the man? Like, so this is how we're going to talk about it. Yes, Michelle, thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Boom. Okay, let's go into it. Avoid using plot devices. J.K. Rowling has specifically come out and said that the only reason Ron and Hermione were together was because she put it in her notes for the books that they were supposed to end up together, right? So she created this outline, and in her outline, Ron and Hermione got together. Literally, when I was reading this as a kid, I'm like, Harry, like, or doesn't Hermione kiss Harry's cheek at the end of book 3 or 4 or something like that? I was shipping Harry and Hermione, okay? Harry and Hermione had much more chemistry and they made more sense. J.K. Rowling stuck with her outline, and the romance between Hermione and Ron feels very forced. Now, I am not here criticizing the ship, and I am not judging you for shipping them, okay? That's not what this is about. So many normies, like people who read who aren't up in the romance, don't care. They care about the main plot. They don't care. They're just like, well, they got together in the book or in the show or whatever. That's just how it is. But when you're a romance writer and when you care about romance, this stuff matters to you. Okay. So this is why you see so many people in the Harry Potter fandom shipping Draco and Hermione, Harry and Hermione, Snape and Hermione. Okay, and you might think Snape, what? But think about it. Okay, like if you compare him to Ron, Snape is he's very honest, just like Hermione can be, socially awkward, but also he's super smart. Hermione has always, always, always respected him. He's super powerful. He's going to take care of Hermione in a way that Ron probably can't. And if we're going with Alan Rickman, that voice, I'm sold. I'm sorry, I'm sold. Um, but anyway, it just doesn't make sense for Hermione to be with Ron when she is so much smarter, when she's a very strong, I don't want to use the word feminist because I feel like it's one of those words that means so many different things, but she's very independent, okay? And Ron is very dependent. And I mean, we all saw what happened. We all read what happened. That jealousy of Harry just because Harry was Harry. And anyway, this could be a whole class, it could be a whole debate, but you don't want your characters to be in this way, right? Like, to go on, and we'll talk, this can include Hermione and Ron, but it can also be said between the lack of buildup between Harry and Ginny. Okay. So we see somewhat that Ginny has this big crush on Harry. But you know what? The books aren't from Ginny, and Harry does not see Ginny in that way. So we're told that, right? Rather than shown it. But I think it's book 6. Suddenly, all of a sudden, like, they're together. Like, yeah, Ginny is this, strong female, but we don't get to see that natural buildup. We just see weak Ginny from book 2, who opened the freaking Chamber of Secrets. And then book 5, Ginny, who's like making out with some of the Gryffindors from Harry's grade, right? So we don't see that buildup. And so when they get together, it doesn't feel like it's earned, okay? Because we don't really see Harry being like having that internal conflict of, oh my gosh, I'm dating Ron's sister, or I have a crush on Ron's sister. And I know that he's a guy, but if you're gonna develop a romance and not just kind of tack it on, it I would appreciate there being more time spent developing that romance. So, having said these things, these are examples of contrived cliche plot devices for your secondary romance. Okay. And these are things that you want to avoid. Even if your primary plot is not romance, you still need to spend even a little bit of time developing it. We don't want to start your mystery with, her being an assistant to like book 4, where nothing has changed between them in that book 4. There is no development of a relationship, but suddenly they're together. You have to earn your relationship. Okay, so how do we avoid doing this? Show, not tell. What do you show exactly? Any interaction between your characters that both, again, I'm sorry for the typos or whatever, that both furthers the plot and strengthens their relationship. Okay. Now, you have to remember that developing a relationship helps your character development. So, usually, if you have your romance, whether it's the main, plot or it's a subplot, you are developing your characters while also progressing the plot. Okay. If you're, I apologize. If you're writing a cozy with an amateur sleuth and a seasoned detective, one way to show developing trust between them is if the detective lets the amateur sleuth question the suspect. Okay. And this shows, like I said, it shows trust. On top of that, if the suspect attacks the the amateur sleuth, we have a external part of revealing your detective's character. He's going to step in, maybe get rougher than he needs to, potentially risking, you know being pulled off the case or even his job in order to protect that amateur sleuth. So not only do you have something internal playing out, which is that building of trust, but you also have something external. And on top of that, he's putting himself at risk, not only physically, but with his job, which can also, for a man, be part of his identity, all for his amateur sleuth, right? So you're doing a lot with that furthering of the plot, furthering of the character, and furthering of the relationship. And this is why plotting a romance can be so powerful for your story. I'm not saying that it's needed, okay? But I am saying that it adds so much to it. Okay. If you're writing an urban fantasy with a witch and a werewolf shifter, you could show him bringing her back to his pack for some kind of reason, especially if he's a quiet, private person. This implies, again, more trust. And it could be that he's forced to do it. you're still have to trust, you're forced to trust somebody. And if she fulfills being worthy of that trust, that just changes his perception of her. So one of them needs to risk vulnerability by helping, someone else. They may be obligated to do it, but this will force the character to realize again, Beauty and the Beast, there's something in him she simply didn't see, right? So a way you can show trust in a regular romance novel is have him walk her home, even if he's a player or a bad boy or even a jerk, right? Have him have good manners. Have him open the door for her or insist on paying the check. Have him text her to make sure she got home safely. I always think like um, some of my favorite characters are like Wolverine, Frank Castle, who's the Punisher, because they're very dark, they're very brutal and violent, and yet they have this one girl that they're very soft with. And for Wolverine, you might think, oh, it's Jean Grey. I'm like, no, it is not Jean Grey. It's actually, in the movies at least for me, it's Rogue. I mean, she watches him like basically beat the shit out of this guy, and she's looking for someone not only who she can trust, but also someone who can get her from point A to point B. So she hitches a ride in this guy's trailer, and she literally saw him over and over just beat him, beat him, beat him. And not only that, she kind of sees that he is other, he's a mutant, and she still chooses to trust him, right? And he's like ready to ditch her on the side when he finds out about her, but he doesn't. He drives off and then he stops and he's like, God damn it. And he picks her up and he takes her to where she needs to go. And for Frank Castle, I mean, he's literally on trial for like he's literally killing everybody who murdered his parent, or not his parents, his family. And this is how Karen meets him, is like he literally murdered a bunch of people, but he calls her Red. He speaks very softly with her. He's very respectful. No, and he calls her, no, he doesn't call her, he calls her ma'am. Like, I love that. And he can be himself with her. Like, you see that there's a different side to him. It's the father, the husband, the person he was before he got hard, before he got angry and full of vengeance. These are the girls or characters who will pull them away from that darkness. Not that they have to change being dark, but that they kind of, if they're towing that line of crossing it, they pull them back. um, so you can utilize it, even though I'm talking about the superheroes, Marvel characters. You can utilize that in your contemporary romance novel. Okay, he can be brutal. He can be a fighter. He can be a marine. He can be um, security guy, right? Like, he can have these things, and she can just inspire that softness in him. Okay, but what about your heroine? You can avoid the cliche, like have her defend him when he's not there, when there isn't that pressure of obligation. Um, Someone could be bad mouthing him, saying something that she herself not is sad, but has said. But she realizes hearing it from someone else how untrue or vicious that is. And that's when she comes and defends him. Something that I see constantly, but always gives me a little like some butterflies, is when like she fixes the hero's tie or like picks lint off his shoulder. It's like a little bit of a touch. Same thing can be said for like if he's brushing hair from her face. So these are little things, which you could say, well, Heather, isn't that technically a cliche? Yes, but this is a cliche that everybody loves. So you can get away with it. So you're gonna to keep your readers reading, right? So I'm gonna talk about something that I talked about in that plotting your series. But because we're talking about romance, I figured that this is a good way to reiterate it. So, how do you make things interesting if romance is the primary story, but the goals are different and you need to keep the romance alive? Same characters in a variety of books. Okay, so I have a serial: dark paranormal ghost romance, Keepers of the Crypt. Okay, there's going to be 8 books, episodes, 20,000 words each, 10 chapters, so 2,000 words per chapter. Enemies to lovers. It is going to be a slow burn emotionally. Um, and it's going to be they're forced to marry each other, so it's that forced proximity, but then you're going to throw marriage into it. So episode 1, they meet, they hate each other, but they make a deal, right? She wants information on his brother because her brother was carried away by shades, and that is my word for like ghosts. And he wants out of his crypt that the keepers of the crypt have essentially like locked him in. Okay. They make a deal. And that deal is you marry me, because once you marry me, I now have citizenship in the human world and I can get out of this crypt. Okay. So in episode 2, he, gets out, introduces her to his world, and they realize they need to move the wedding up because there's a threat. Episode 3, wedding and sex. So we have the first 2 episodes as build-ups, right? If we remember the 8-point plot, your episode 1 is your inciting incident. Okay. So we see what it's like being a keeper. We see what the problem is. We meet all of the characters. And then we have something at the very end of, okay, what can we do um, to go into this world? Call to adventure, right? Episode 2, he literally takes her to his world and introduces her to it. Okay. But they need to move up the wedding. So your first plot twist is the wedding. And guess what? Consummation is a requirement for this. So you're going to have some sex, and we get to have sex in the every episode following because it's paranormal romance and that's what my readers expect. So episode 4, she's trapped by someone, he has to rescue her. This is developing their relationship. This is on an emotional level because now she's starting to trust him. But episode 5, he has a secret from her. Episode 6, we introduce a betrayal of the couple by someone close to them. Episode 7, she sacrifices herself for his safety and his life. He's obviously pissed and goes after her. And remember, your episode 7 is your climax. And episode 8, the two discover the truth about the brother, they defeat their opponent, and they stay married. Okay. So that's kind of how I structured it. But it went from, they're having sex, they're hooking up, and they're married all in that third episode. There's still 5 episodes left. So let me see. I don't know if I added the slide. Okay. Yes, I did. So during the course of the serial, even though the romance is the main story, both characters have individual goals that they must accomplish. She wants to find her missing brother. He wants to get out. Okay. Part of the tension that crosses each episode is the personality of the characters themselves. Okay. Keaton is an abrasive, rude, obnoxious, overbearing, and overprotective husband to Kara. He keeps things from her because of something that happened to him in the past, but also because he thinks the less she knows, the more she's protected. So we see him keep a few things from her over the course of the 8 episodes. So after they've already gotten married and had sex, they haven't confessed their feelings yet. But this is another way to um, keep that tension between your couple even after they've gotten together because they don't trust each other yet. And with Keaton thinking that he's protecting her, now I'm going to be honest with you, Keaton's selfish. That's like one of his biggest like personality flaws. So he's doing this for himself, but he's also doing it because that's his wife, right? Um, at the very end, though, in episode 8, when it really matters, he makes the choice to trust her and they're able to work together. And so to me, that trust was earned because he hadn't done that before. So we see him shift in his behavior. Okay. Now, the reason this works with Keaton and it's not like a Ross Rachel situation where you think that they've resolved this trust issue is because Keaton never promises Kara that he's gonna do anything different. They'll argue about it. He's never going to change that about himself. Okay. Nothing is resolved. It's who he is. So he's making it's not even to him. He's not making a mistake. He's not going to apologize for it. He's basically saying, look, this is what you get. And you don't have to like it, but this is who I am. Okay. He has his reasons for making that choice and he justifies them. But at the very end, he does trust her. And all of those choices are choices he makes and doubles down on. It isn't wishy washy. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that again. Let's move on, only for them not to move on and to make the same mistake again. It shows character growth. And we see that he starts to trust Kara throughout the course of the serial. But again, the romance started right away. They're married. They consummate the marriage by the end of book 3. But the relationship, the story, it's not done yet. It just means they need to figure out what the romance means, what the relationship means, and who they are inside and outside of the relationship. What do they want, right? How do they want their future to look based on their present, based on their past? So these are things that will help you maintain that reader reading your books, even if your characters get together. Okay, what about contemporary romance? This is difficult, right? Because we know we don't what we don't want and we know what we do. We don't want miscommunication as a plot device or conflict. Don't make your characters stupid. Are they on a break or aren't they? Not only clarify your readers, but make sure your characters know. Okay. Um, don't do the breakup makeup rotation, especially on a cliffhanger. If your characters break up over some stupid fight as a cliffhanger, your readers know they're going to get together and they're just going to be mad at you that you think that they're that stupid that they're going to rush and buy the second book or whatever number it is. Don't do that to them. Okay. The accidental kiss with no chance of an explanation. So we've seen this before where they either hook up or they realize that they love each other, but it's getting to be too much. So we need some, like time away, right? Um, and uh, suddenly the ex is back in the picture. Okay, it's like the wedding singer. So Julia, Drew Barrymore, is going over to confess her feelings for Adam Sandler, Robbie, and when she gets to his house, his ex shows up in just his t-shirt. And by show up, I mean she's the one who answers the door. So Julia is obvious like she was like ready to leave her fiance because her fiance is trash, but whatever. And she's like super hurt. And she's like, fuck this. I'm still gonna go get married because I almost ruined my relationship for this guy and he's sleeping with his ex. Um, But you don't see Drew Barrymore going over to Adam Sandler and being like, I cared about you. I didn't realize you were back with your ex. Or even just not even mention her feelings, but be like, I didn't realize you were back with your ex. Now she's acting on her emotions. But even we can admit, as much as I love that movie, it's a little petty, right? Because the second she does that, she's like embarrassed and she rushes off to get married to her douchebag ex, or not ex at the time, but It's frustrating because we think that she's made progress here and seen like my ex or my fiance is a douchebag. Why did I fall in love with Robbie if my fiance was so great, right? Um so like that's where it's frustrating because you're just like, Drew, like that was really stupid. Like, why are you making that assumption? And granted, she is answering, she is answering the door in his t-shirt, whatever. But as an adult, and the thing is, the thing that people don't understand is honest communication does not mean we're in therapy and we're being respectful necessarily. Drew Barrymore could have been like, okay, move, bitch, and gone over to Robbie and been like, what are you doing? Why are you with this asshole? Like, why are you like, you guys, you can have your characters fight over it as long as they talk about it, okay? Like, as long as it's not like, "Oh, I'm assuming the worst, so I'm gonna be petty and run off and marry a douchebag to really stick it to you." Like, that's stupid, right? Now, an exception to this is when the opposite happens in the movie, and you see Drew Barrymore is trying on her wedding dress with her mom, and she's pretending to say, "Oh, I'm Mrs. Robbie Hart. I'm getting married to Robbie and not Glenn." Whatever. And then Robbie goes over to confess his feelings, but he can only see her from the window. And he's like, oh, wow, she's so happy. I'm not going to take that away from her. So I hope you understand the difference between like the accidental kiss with no chance of an explanation. Drew Barrymore is the one who acts petty. She's the one I have the problem with in terms of that particular plot device. Okay. Whereas Adam Sandler, he's being self-sacrificial without being a martyr, in my opinion, because he's going over, even though he thinks she's still engaged, he's going over to tell her how he feels. And then he sees that she's happy. He sees like, you know, obviously he doesn't see the whole picture, but he sees that and he's like, you know what? I wanted to be that happy on my wedding day. I'm not going to take that from her. If she is that happy, then I can be her friend and I can be happy with her. So I hope I hope that explanation is makes sense. Um, Again, okay, cheating is a huge no-no in almost every romance, especially between the hero and the heroine. There are certain exceptions if you write dark romance and the heroine is with a douchebag and winds up kissing the hero. Obviously, we're not even going to get into reverse harem because you know it's not really cheating, is it? But just know that especially with romance, cheating is an automatic DNF for so many people. And even if they're not cheating on each other, they don't like readers don't like that they have um, cheated at all. So that's just something to keep in mind. So how do you raise tension with contemporary romance specifically? Okay, here are some suggestions. Exes, potential love interests. Now, the great thing about using these in a series is that if you write the ex the right way, they could grow into potential characters for a spin-off trilogy or duet or whatever you're doing. um, you could do forced separation for the sake of the other, kind of like when I explained Adam Sandler deciding not to um, tell Drew Barrymore his true feelings for each other. Um, do you know why cheating was forgiven by fans of Outlander? You know what? That's a really good question. Are you when okay, so I haven't read, I've only seen the first season. Is it because she was married at the beginning and then goes back in time? Okay. Um, I think part of that was she had to do it for survival. Um, Part of it also is the time travel aspect of it, right? Like I think that back in the day, consummating a marriage was a big deal because you could annul a marriage if it wasn't consummated. So, for example, in Game of Thrones, my ship, which is Sansa and Tyrion. So, Tyrion never forces Sansa to have sex, even though Sansa could later argue our marriage doesn't count because we didn't have sex. So, I think that because at the beginning, she can't really say that she fell from, I think it was the 1940s. So, she kind of has to go along with this in order to survive it. It definitely doesn't like hurt that she's cheating with Jamie, who's played by Sam Coughlin, something like I can't pronounce his last name, but everyone is in love with him. Where, and I think this was done on purpose, where her husband was also like the asshole or the very bad guy who wound up, and I don't know if this is a spoiler if it's season one, but like raping Jamie, I believe. Like, so by the same actor playing the husband and the like worst guy in the world, I think that the reader or the viewers can kind of like forgive that. But that's a really good point because especially if you're writing something like historical or fantasy or dark, is that considered cheating, right? Like it's even like if you ask that question of my Keepers of the Crypt, where consummation is a requirement. If you have to have sex with somebody once a week to satisfy this marriage law, is that, like what, how do you define that, right? So there's these blurred lines. And I think that that's why we label some things like this as dark. Um, yeah, I mean, you bring up a really, I think that there's also an exception to the rule. And I'm sure that Diane, I think it's Gabalon, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. She writes really like big, thick books. So I think that it it makes sense and it serves the story. I think it starts out as survival and she kind of has to consummate this marriage just because consummation was a big deal. Um, but then obviously she starts falling for him. Yeah, no problem. And if anyone has any other questions while I'm talking, feel free. It's not a big deal. Okay, so we have forced separation for the sake of each other. So time, like a time clock. Sports, like they have a game they have to get to or a plane they have to catch because they're going on an away, they're going to play an away game. Um, Secret baby, baby's got to be born at some point, right? Fake dating, when does the fake dating end? Um, bias, protective family and friends, right? So Flo from Ted Lasso, she's super hilarious, and she treats Rebecca's ex-husband Rupert like it's Rupert or Russell, but she treats him like shit. And um, I think that that's really like that adds conflict, especially if your heroine is thinking about getting back with you know the ex or whatever, but that adds conflict. A job, a family who doesn't approve, a child. So you see a lot of the single dads, single moms, that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm going to go on another rant here because I find it a lot like in trad pub, in TVs and movies. Don't be afraid to give readers what they want. Please, like, don't be. It's really frustrating when we see a woman having to choose between an awesome job and an awesome love life. Okay. I don't want to hear men are trash from romance writers because we need to write amazing heroes that our readers fall in love with because we all deserve to have an amazing romance. And we need to write badass women who knows what she's worth and gets what she needs, a job and a happy ending. She's allowed to want both. Okay. I haven't been excited about a Disney movie in a long time because they've essentially leaned on this. Well, it's not all about the romance, or you don't need romance, and that's fine. Like Encanto didn't need a romance because it was a family movie, right? At the same time, I'm a romantic and I love romance. So I'm going to start shipping people. Like, I need this is how you get me to these movies is if I know there's going to be some kind of like a good romance, okay? Um I'm not here to like curb the discussion of romance into what's going on. It's fine. At the end of the day, people can do what they want and focus on what they want. And yes, romance isn't necessary to lead a fulfilling life. Okay. However, romance. Okay, guys, as romance writers, our readers want romance from us. Yes, we want to see our heroines grow and transform into individuals who can't survive without a man. However, that doesn't mean we don't want to have a man if we can have one. But not only can we have one, we have to be able to earn a man the same way a man has to earn a heroine. If our heroine wants a badass alpha, she needs to allow herself to be vulnerable. She can be a badass, she can save herself. But if we're not showing her vulnerable side to her alpha, why is he going to want to protect her if she doesn't need him to protect her, if that makes any sense? Okay. So now she might be stubborn. Okay. She might be like, I'm going to do this on my own. I don't need you. And then she realizes that she does need him. That is not a knock against women. That is not a knock against like feminism, in my opinion. It just means that our heroine needs our hero and our hero needs our heroine. It's so easy to make our heroes vulnerable. We see this. Like I've already mentioned Wolverine. I've already mentioned the Punisher. Our heroes can do the same thing to our strong, badass females too. And how, like, this is how we draw chemistry and attraction. And honestly, it's cliche. I love it when the hero saves the heroine. The heroine can be a badass. She can save the hero. And then she's like distracted by saving the hero that like she doesn't realize someone else is coming and then the hero can save her and it's like mutually exclusive, guys. Like we can have it both ways, okay? She should be able to want everything and she should be able to get everything. Like, let's go into True Blood, for example. I'm so mad at that show. Even I'm so mad at that book series because it's like, okay, you have all of that chemistry with, okay, I don't want to go off on a side tangent, but we're talking about romance and we're talking about plotting and we're talking about what can we avoid as being contrived, okay? Season 4 of True Blood should have been my like wet dream, guys. Sookie and Eric were going to get together. But guess what? It's using that contrived plot device of I'm taking away your memory. So I'm not the badass Eric that you hate. I'm more vulnerable and whatever. Okay. So Sookie decides that she has to take care of him, and that's fine. And then they hook up. But then he gets his memories back. And suddenly Sookie's like, "Oh, I can't be with you." Like, what? Eric still feels the same way for you. Like, you always have known who he truly is. Like, that made me so mad at her because I was like, how do you not like you can have sex with him when he's like vulnerable and you can start falling for him when he's this Eric, but you can't accept Eric for who he is and yet you want to be accepted for who you are. Like I'm not even going to talk about the ending. I'm not even going to talk about the ending. But this is what I mean by just give the readers what they want. I'm not saying let your readers dictate the story because you still have to serve the story, but like it has to make sense. And yes, exactly, Michelle. It fell apart like I don't, but you can't draw out a love triangle just to be like, oh, who is she going to choose? And it's like, oh, guess what? At the end of the day, she chose a freaking human. Nobody that we cared about, no one on screen, nothing. And I was like, what? And so I can't rewatch that show knowing how it's going to end. Like maybe I can go through like seasons 1 through 3 and then watch clips of Eric in the rest of the seasons. But it's so I can't even rewatch it because of how it ended. And the reason I'm talking to you guys about this is because you had that contrived moment of, well, his memories are gone. They could have utilized this. She didn't have to get with him, but to reject him so completely, to close it off so completely, even though she's known who he is the past 3 seasons, is so infuriating because she has that expectation of, I need to be accepted for exactly who I am. And I just didn't think that that was fair. I'm not saying they had to get together once he got his memories back. There was still so much that they could have worked out between them to add tension and to develop. But I think that if you're going to love someone, you have to love them completely. And if she couldn't love him pre-memories, then she shouldn't have she anyway, we're already an hour and a half into this. Let's just keep going. So, one of the things I really, really appreciated in the second season of Ted Lasso was when Rebecca believed that one of her players, Sam, who happens to be the guy that she's hooking up with and that she genuinely cares about, is being scouted for a potential team in Africa, which is where Sam is from and which is where his family is. Okay. Rebecca has already told Sam that she needs some time before she can commit to a serious relationship where they tell everyone about their feelings. But after this potential conflict of is he going to this new team, she winds up at Sam's door and basically tells him that she doesn't want him to go, but she also would be happy if he does choose to go. Like she's happy for him to get to play a sport that he loves, to get a huge contract, and to be closer to his family. Like she'd be happy for him. However, she can't give him the answer that she wants when it comes to their personal relationship just yet. She still needs that time to sort it out. Okay. And I really appreciated this because she doesn't selflessly act like a martyr and keep her feelings to herself and be like, oh, you should go. That's also like to go on another side tangent. That's also like a contrived thing of like the hero or the heroine swallowing their feelings because they assume their love interest is going to be happy leaving them. And so they think that they're doing the right thing by keeping it to themselves. And again, let's go back to the wedding singer. It makes sense for Adam Sandler to have done what he did. Like to me, that's believable. That's true to his character. And based on his history, I can understand why he did it. So he earned that. He earned that stereotypical little cliche um, moment. But Drew Barrymore didn't earn her moment by doing that. But a lot of the times it's like, dude, we already know you're gonna get together. And and if they don't get together because of this without even communicating, that's where it's like, you guys couldn't have even had a conversation. You long distance doesn't exist now. Like, what are we doing? Especially for grown adults. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you're telling me that you don't have like men or women traveling on a weekly basis for work. Like, anyway. So, anyway, I really appreciated what Rebecca did because she basically was both selfish and selfless at the same time. She was like, I'm happy for you, but I know I want you to stay. Um, and she's not going to lie and force herself into a relationship either in order to get what she wants. Um, And I think that that was a really, really poignant moment of a very well-rounded female character who maybe doesn't know exactly what she wants romantically, but isn't afraid to be messy about things. And that's what I want to see more of in books, in TV, in um, like movies. I want to see messy heroines. Um, you know, I don't want her to be the strong, independent, perfect, you know, Galadriel in, Rings of Power. I want her to be messy and imperfect and not know what she wants and doesn't have her shit together, but can still put in the effort and to sort of like isn't afraid to risk everything, or even if it's considered selfish. Anyway, Okay. So, of course, you have that great moment. And then, kind of spoiler alert, we have Roy and Keely breaking up because they're too busy. Okay. They can't focus on their relationship because of their jobs. That's not real to me. Like, as someone who's married with 5 children, I can tell you that there are days when me and my husband see each other during a quick rush dinner to get our kids off to practice or at the very end of the day, right? We are extremely busy because of our jobs and because of our kids. And yet we somehow make it work. We understand that being a family is going to mean it's busy. We don't break up because suddenly things have gotten busier. They've been together for a year. It's not like they just started dating each other, which again would make sense, right? Um, the if you've established a relationship and you're with somebody, um, like y the breakup, it just it seems contrived, whatever. Um, Again, it's like we talk about how can we, what's the black moment of some of these things, and I just think that this breakup is very contrived because again, at the end of the day, we know the characters are getting together, and this is a very stupid way to show or to have this black moment because it's like if they don't even have kids yet, if they don't even have like if they're not even married, what is going to happen when his job stays the same and he's traveling all the time? If she can't handle it now, a year in, or vice versa, if he can't handle it now, what's going to change? So I don't understand why you would break up over not seeing each other. If you care about each other, wouldn't you try to make it work? Wouldn't you try to um like schedule time for each other before a breakup? Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. Um However, I will say that this could be an excellent reason for a breakup off screen. And when you start your series, it's that second chance romance of okay, they've grown and they've realized what a mistake that they made. Okay, cliffhangers. I know so many people wanted to know about this. So let's talk about it. Um, so some people live by them, some people avoid using them, and some people have a happy medium with them. So today we're going to discuss using cliffhangers specifically for your romance without it being too contrived or cliche or frustrating for your readers. I'm not here to whether like to debate them or not. I think that's beyond the scope of this course. I will say for full transparency that I definitely use hard closing, hard cliffhangers for my guys. I thought I had this. I'm sorry. I got sick. Um, and even though readers have mentioned those cliffhangers in my reviews, the reviews are still positive. Okay. It makes them hungry for the next book. And the cliffhangers work because they make sense. And I'll explain that a little bit more further on. So, we need to start discussing what the purpose of a cliffhanger is. Okay. I know it might be common sense, but if you're going to utilize it as part of your author brand, or at least in the series that you're writing, you need to know what you're doing it for. Okay. Back in the day when there used to be like commercials for like TV, television writers were given the responsibility of trying to maintain viewership when the TV would cut for like a break, a commercial break. This meant that they had to leave mini cliffhangers every 15 or so minutes into a show in order to keep um, readers watching, whatever. Like, basically, they need to ensure that the audience was going to watch the paid advertising in order to keep watching the show. Okay. There might also be a huge cliffhanger at the end of an episode in order to ensure viewership. So at the next week, the viewer will be back in order to see what happens or how that cliffhanger resolves. Okay. And there's going to be a huge cliffhanger at the end of every season to ensure fans will return the following season to see how the cliffhanger is resolved as well. This is why we see a lot of debate about whether the Netflix model is actually the best way to gain popularity or viewership compared to Amazon or Disney, where they release one episode a week rather than the entire series at the same time. So Netflix episodes can still have that cliffhanger, but as a viewer, if I know I have an episode to watch right after, I can binge watch it. I can be like, oh, I'm going to go grab some food. Um, but am I going to be talking about it for 3 weeks? Possibly. But I know I am going to be talking about it if the show is only releasing one episode a week. This is why Netflix has changed up their model a little bit and done part one and part twos of popular shows such as Stranger Things and now The Witcher. That's supposed to say season three. Okay, so how can we utilize cliffhangers as an author? Well, I can tell you that I use cliffhangers because I want readers to buy my next book. I have no problem admitting that. I don't think that that's a like that shouldn't be an issue. Um, I am white, guys, but that is not what that is supposed to say. I um when I write, it's not like they can just grab the next I'm wide, okay? Like wide. So they can't grab the next book in Kindle Unlimited or like some kind of exclusive program. But I the only reason I use the cliffhangers is to ensure I get the next sale. That's what I want. So I'm not worried about pages read. Um, they can't necessarily binge read unless they buy a box set. So a caveat to this, obviously, readers don't like cliffhangers. I mean, as a television viewer, I hated them, especially since I never knew if the series was going to get renewed or not. The readers feel the same way, so you might want to consider doing your diligence as an author to build up that trust where even if there is a hard cliffhanger, your readers are going to know that you will be writing and publishing the next book. This is also why some readers will only read a series if it's complete or if it's boxed up in a box set, which gives them access to the entire series as well as a discount. However, despite my hatred of cliffhangers, I was back the next season making sure my favorite couple stayed or got together or confessed their feelings, or if the side character I fell in love with actually survived or what have you. So they work. They work, they work, they work. Okay. When it comes to cliffhangers, what's the difference between one that serves the story and one that doesn't? Okay. Again, you have to understand your genre rules. If you're writing a serial, readers should understand going into it that you will have hard cliffhangers that don't like the cliffhangers don't wrap up the story because the entirety of the serial is progressing through one plot line. I know that's misspelled, guys. I know. I'm sorry. My text to talk obviously does not know that though. However, for other longer novels, you can always wrap up the main plot and leave a cliffhanger that's softer and that will lead you to the next, not series, but the next book. Okay. A lot of the time, this will be used frequently in in genres that aren't primarily romance or romance is the subplot. Okay. So, we're going to get into potential spoilers here because we're going to highlight some cliffhangers that work and some that don't. So, I hope that that's okay. I've tried to pick out examples that have been out for a while, so if you're not like if you think it's a spoiler alert like 13 years after the show debuted, then that's on you. So a good example that highlights where a good cliffhanger is the end of Game of Thrones, which is the first book in the George R. R. Martin's A Song of Fire and Ice. Okay. This was also the final episode of the HBO TV show Game of Thrones. Okay. Sean Bean's character is essentially beheaded despite the fact that he is the primary character in the first book. Okay. Now, George has, I'm talking about him like we're best friends, but just know that it's not a shock value because his death was alluded throughout the book. So he planted the seeds early on. And within the world that Martin created, it made sense. It served the story, it served the world, all of that. Now, um, okay. So um if he ended it like as I should say Ned, as Ned Stark is about to be um, beheaded, that's the wrong place to end it. That's a shitty cliffhanger. And your readers are going to be super pissed off about it because, again, it's that contrived are they or aren't they? Okay. Now, um, readers are going to assume he's either going to survive because he's the main character. And even if he doesn't, the fact that you end right there, it's like they know that you're trying to get them to buy the next book to figure it out. And as good as an author you are, readers might shut down that game that you're trying to play with them because you're not serving the story, you're serving your pocketbook. Okay. So let's talk about why, how to end it the right way if you're going to use. So Martin kills Ned in the first book. Okay. The story is essentially resolved, and that death kind of ends the story. But there is a cliffhanger because now we have to go into the world. We have to go back into the world with book two, knowing that a very important person has just been beheaded and shit is going to hit the fan. Okay. It's the reaction of that cliffhanger or of that death. That is the cliffhanger, right? Sansa is still in King's Landing. Okay. She is the last Stark in King's Landing. I mean, technically Arya, but Arya's run off. Okay. Sansa's a prisoner. That does not get tied up in book one. Okay. We have to figure out what's going to happen to Sansa. How is Sansa going to react? How is Arya going to, how is Rob? How is John? Has everyone in Ned's family going to react once they find out that Ned is decapitated? Is there going to be war? What's going to happen? Okay. That is why the cliffhanger isn't contrived. The story actually ends. We see the death. We see Ned getting decapitated. Okay. We see what happens when you try to play that Game of Thrones. Now, as we as readers and TV viewers are going to wait in anticipation to see how everyone reacts, how everyone in the Baratheon family reacts, because remember, Joffrey, the little shit, is the one who decided this. It wasn't his mom, it wasn't his uncle, it wasn't, Tyrion or his grandfather. This was all Joffrey. So it's cause and effect. A great way to end or use a cliffhanger, have a cause, but the effect of it, wait until your next book. Okay, but how can we apply this to romance or romantic subplots? Okay, applying it to a regular romance is going to be tricky in the same way that writing three books in a trilogy with the same couple is going without using plot devices is also going to be tricky, but we can do it. First, remind yourself that your job is to serve the story. You cannot force things just to force tension or conflict or whatever. Okay. But before you break these characters up, remember this. Readers understand that with romance, the two characters are going to get together, which we've already discussed. Okay. Even A Court of Thorns and Roses has Tamlin and Freya, and I'm sorry if I misspelled their names with text to talk or whatever, talk to text. So Tamlin and Freya get together at the end of book one. Okay. The cliffhanger wasn't that they were going to break up. It was now that they're together, how is this going to affect the Fae world and how is it going to affect the human world? Okay. If you utilize a breakup for the sake of breaking the characters up, just so you can use book two or book three to build them back together again, you are setting yourself up for failure. Readers already know that I'm really sorry, guys, that your couple is going to get together. They already know this. So you're just wasting their time by breaking them up, unless there is a very good specific reason to do so. So, what's a good reason to break characters up? For one, it could be because they're going to school. They have a job that requires travel. It's almost like a forced separation. So, when I say break characters up, I don't mean they got together in a relationship and now they're breaking up and moving on. What I'm saying is, how do we force them apart? Okay. Um, again, to go back to the example I used from Ted Lasso, really make sure it makes sense for your characters to actually split up if you've already worked on building them together. Because now you're just going to go back in book two and have to reestablish a relationship. Like, think of Twilight, right? You invested all of this time in Bella and Edward getting together. And then all of a sudden in book two, like, he has to go somewhere and they break up for her protection. And then she meets Jacob, and she was like adamant about getting Edward back, but Edward's like, no. And I know this is young adult, so like I get it, but at the same time, it's just like, we know you're gonna get together. We know, why keep it apart? Like, okay. Okay. So one way to utilize the forced separation, and we're talking about this because this could potentially be a cliffhanger, is to have your characters hook up or get together in a physical sense without actually confessing their feelings. So you can build them up physically and show that they have witty banter, great sexual chemistry, all while keeping their emotional distance from each other. So, like when my hockey player now has to go back to Canada for 3 months of summer until he comes back for that off season training, it makes sense why he doesn't choose to bring my heroine with him, because they haven't actually committed to each other emotionally. And that separation is going to force him to realize, oh, it's not just sex. I actually miss her. Or I actually, I just found this news out of her, oh, Taylor Swift is going on tour. And it made him think of her because she's a huge Taylor Swift. Um, so they haven't committed to each other emotionally, right? So that can also go back to your characters' wounds or fears or misbeliefs. Okay. So again, you're not actually breaking them up, because if they haven't actually confessed their feelings and established a romantic monogamous relationship, it's not a breakup. So they can hook up. It's like if your professor is hooking up with his student and they haven't confessed their feelings, but end of term is coming up and winter break is coming, it's sort of like, okay, they're not going to see each other during winter break and they are forced to be separated, but they've never had that conversation of, are we exclusive, what are we, how do I feel? They may know how they feel, but they haven't actually talked. So they don't have that communication. Now, it's not a miscommunication, okay? They haven't actually communicated. So when you have two characters who are like, "Oh, I don't know if he feels that way about me," that isn't as contrived, right? Because we can't read people's minds. And we all know of someone who was led on by somebody who thought, oh, they liked me and then they didn't. Okay. So I hope that that makes sense. The difference between, you have established romantic relationship and now we have to break them up like Twilight, versus, okay, maybe they've kissed a couple of times if we're writing a little bit younger or a little bit closed door, but they haven't established anything between them yet, besides the physical. Okay. Other breakups could be, okay, they don't want to ruin a friendship. And when I say breakups, I don't necessarily mean that they have that established romantic relationship yet. It could just mean that they're keeping themselves apart. So they don't want to ruin a friendship. One of them believes the other is in love with somebody else, right? So maybe they're hooking up, but they're still in love with their ex. One of them believes there's no way the other person would be attracted to them in any way. Now, their families or someone else close to them disapprove. Something is at stake, whether it's a job, a grade, or reputation. And I didn't add this, but there could be a threat. Now, you might say, well, Heather, isn't like having a threat and staying away because of the threat contrived? Yeah, but if it's like a physical threat, like, and it fits in your world and it makes sense for your story and you're not using it just as a plot device, then I'm sorry, but that does work. And I love that shit. Like, I hate it, but I love it. Like, as long as you don't reuse it, and again, as long as it isn't forced, like, If she's a badass and can take care of herself, you don't necessarily need to keep your hero away unless it's like, but it's like if her sister is threatened, or if her mom is threatened, or if their unborn child is threatened, or her daughter because she's a single mom. If that person is threatened, then maybe that's when you're like, oh, I need to back off. So that's just stuff to keep in mind. Okay. So, how do we integrate these cliffhangers seamlessly? Depending on what your genre is, it'll also help you figure out what kind of cliffhanger your trilogy or duet will be, or longer, depending on what type of genre you're writing. If you're writing a cozy mystery, you know that you'll be solving the murder in the book because you're writing an open door cliffhanger. So your plot A is going to get solved, the mystery is going to get solved. And that's going to be satisfying to your, not feeders, guys, readers. Um, because they'll have that resolution. But then you'll tack on something at the end that's going to lead to book two. Another body could be found, which would kick off your second book for a new mystery. It could be that the detective, the grizzled detective, finally asks Miss Sunshine out on a date. It could be that suddenly your amateur sleuth's estranged mom shows up at her door and needs a place to stay. These are all potential cliffhangers that work because the main story has been resolved. Okay. If you're writing something like dark mafia romance, you might want to end a book with a harder cliffhanger. Um, like again, and this is because romance is your main plot. Okay. So your stuff does not have to necessarily be as resolved as long as you increase that conflict or that tension. So instead of ending the cliffhanger with the hero taking, the heroine, not hero and, but the heroine taking a pregnancy test, end the cliffhanger with a positive pregnancy test, right? There's your cause and effect. This way, you are not baiting your readers. You're not using pregnancy as a device to get readers to read the next book. Okay. They know for sure that your heroine is pregnant. Now they want to buy the next book because they want to see how the hero's going to find out, how the rival syndicate is going to find out, and how the heroine is going to survive with this unborn baby. Okay. So, a good way to look at it is give them that last shock at the very end, but no reactions. Give them the cause, but not the effect. So, cliffhangers are meant to tantalize the readers. They are invested in your story, and you want to encourage them to jump into the next book as quickly as possible, especially when they're like writing the highest high, finishing your book. Okay. Um, if you're writing a serial with hard cliffhangers, like those are expected because there's only one main plot line for the most part, and your word count is less than a novella and a novel, usually. Okay. Hard cliffhangers can be utilized in romance as well, even within novels. We've already discussed how you can do it for a dark mafia. If you're writing a sports romance, don't end on the possibility of your hero being traded to a rival team with your heroine's ex. Find out at the end that no, he for sure did get traded. And that's it. Then there's your cliffhanger. Now what? Now your readers gonna be like, what the fuck? You just dropped this bomb on me and you're walking away. Okay. So ask yourself, now what? When using cliffhangers, this happened. Now what? Don't just threaten to drop the bomb. If that makes any sense. Most of the time, your readers are going to know exactly what's going to happen next. If you end with her taking a pregnancy test, they know one of two things. Either your heroine is pregnant, or you, as an author, use pregnancy to try to get them to buy the next book, which a lot of readers don't appreciate it. If you end with the pregnancy, you're closing that plot point, right? You're not baiting them, you're not tricking them, you're not trying to tell them, ooh, find out if you get to the next book. You're leaving them wondering what's going to happen next. So it's like not find out in the next book. It's you found out, what the hell does that mean? And that's going to be the next book. Okay. So we talked cliffhangers, and I really hope that that like made sense. But now we're going to talk about structuring the romance. Um, Grab your metadata. It's important to know how many books you're going to have, as well as where your characters begin the series and how you want them to end the series. So, structuring your romance is another way of saying, how do you keep the readers interested in reading your romance, especially after they get together? There are plenty of ways to do this. And I'm sorry, guys, we're at like the 2 hour mark. So, I apologize. I don't mean this to go on for so long. I think we're almost, maybe almost done. Maybe I think we're about 75% of the way. I apologize. But this is important, and I know that this is a big deal to everybody, and I'm trying to be as clear as I can. So I hope you don't mind. Um, Emotional and physical. So just remember that just because they hook up, it doesn't mean they're actually together. And just because they realize they love each other doesn't mean they've actually committed to each other. Okay. So I'm going to go through potential genres and give you some examples. Obviously, take this and see if it can help you apply it to what you're writing or give you ideas. So, book one, if you're writing a sports romance, same characters, a trilogy. Okay. You have your meet cute, your forced proximity, enemies to lovers. There's going to be sex in this. Your cliffhanger is that his ex comes back into the picture because she's still part of the nonprofit that the sports team is running, right? Maybe she's a chair or she is an event planner or whatever. Okay. Book two, feelings. What are they? Is this worth it? More sex. Um, Now she has to start working with the ex. Okay. Finally get together in book two. But your cliffhanger is now their relationship is revealed to the world before they could. Um, they've already established their relationship, but it's almost like that they just got married and they want to enjoy being married before they tell everybody, right? So they don't get that chance. Their relationship is revealed and everyone is judging them because everybody and their mother loved the ex. Okay. Book three. So now that the heroine is forced to be in the public life, she needs to figure out if this is what she even really wants. Okay. So they have to figure that out while they're navigating the scandal. They're close to a breakup. He has to play an away game. So they're forced to separate. Now it's high tension. They realize they miss each other. Maybe she's watching him play. And, you could even have a scene of the ex and the heroine. If the ex is a bitch, they could have a confrontational scene. If the ex is like, I just want you to know I do still love him, but I can see that he's a better person because of you. Uh, I'm not gonna do anything to threaten that. I don't think that I could, even if I wanted to. Like you could have them have that conversation in your book three. So he comes back, they finally get together, they realize that this is what they want, and they live happily ever after. Okay, a billionaire office romance with a Grumpy Sunshine trilogy could look like this. Book one is your meet cute, forced proximity. She handles his temper tantrums. She's dating, and he thinks all of her guys are shit. She tells him to hook her up with his friend. He agrees till he doesn't. The cliffhanger is she goes to Paris with the guy because the boss did not make it on time to confess his feelings for her. Book two, the friend is perfect, but she's not feeling him and she doesn't understand why. The guy points out that she probably has feelings for her boss, but she's in denial. Meanwhile, the boss runs into his ex and he starts asking for advice. Not even advice, but like, where did we go wrong? And, they get that closure. There's a possibility that they'll get together, but he never does. Never does. Even if she tries, there's no kissing. And he realizes, oh, I love the heroine. Don't do that. Okay, side rant. This is something else that's contrived. He has to kiss or hook up or whatever with somebody else for him to realize that he loves the heroine. No, like our girl is so badass and so great. that he doesn't need to utilize that. He doesn't need to use somebody else to make him realize that. Hell no. He knows it. He just can't admit it to himself. Okay. And he might start seeing himself as why they can't get together, which is why he might be seeking closure from an ex, not to kiss her, not to hook up with her to see, oh, are these just random feelings? No, no. Okay. So our sunshine comes home and sees news of him with his ex. Cliffhanger. He tells her he loves her, not the ex. So one way to thwart your readers is to kind of hint at like, oh, here we go again. She's going to think that he's with the ex or he's with the ex and not want anything to do. But then you have that unpredictable confession, but we don't see her reaction. So we give her the confession, don't see the reaction. We don't end on we need to talk, right? Because that's bait. We end on I love you. And that's where it ends. Okay. Book three, they get together, but their relationship is a conflict of interest. And now they have to choose between work and their relationship. And what does it mean for her, right? Because it's his company. He's certainly not going to quit. And she's been working her ass off to be taken seriously and established in this field. So even if she does break things off with him, or even if she quits the job, everyone's going to know that she's dating this guy. So she's not going to be able to be hired because there's always going to be that question of, well, did she fuck around to get where she is? So you have all of that conflict on top of, maybe the ex is coming around to fuck things over. Maybe her ex, her high school sweetheart, comes back. It doesn't even have to be romantic. It could be that maybe her mom is sick and now she's starting to realize, there are bigger things than just a job or, just stuff like that. But you can do this without it being contrived. Okay. A dark mafia romance trilogy, same couple, could look like this: enemies to lover, forced marriage, arranged marriage, whatever. When they get married, he doesn't force her to have sex or hurt her despite his reputation. He's an intellect who likes to read while also killing people for the syndicate that he belongs to. Someone wants revenge on him, and because the two have married, she gets kidnapped. There's that cliffhanger. Um, and I guess you could end it one of two ways where she gets kidnapped, or maybe like I maybe even end it where he finds out that she's been kidnapped, right? So book two, he gets her back, basically burning the whole world down to get her. I love that. Love that trope. Adrenaline leads to sex. He gets territorial over her. More info comes out. Now you could have sex in book one, right? Like he doesn't force her to have sex. They get to know each other better. They start hooking up. Or you could have it in book two, right? Maybe they kiss. Maybe they want to have sex, but they keep getting interrupted. So there is that physical connection in book one. So book two, adrenaline leads to sex. They finally do it. He gets territorial over her. More info comes out on who wants revenge. She gets approached by FBI to be an informant. The cliffhanger is she finds out she's pregnant. And remember, she finds out she's pregnant before she knows if she loves him or not. She knows if he loves her. So she's like, and they're in a dangerous world. Does she want to raise her kid in this environment? Okay. Book three, it turns out her father's trying to kill him, which makes him hesitate because, he has feelings for her. He finds out about the pregnancy. Daughter confronts the dad. Maybe she kills him, confess their feelings, and they finally establish a relationship. And they get together. Okay. When it comes to genre fiction, however, it's easier to keep a couple apart, especially if they're starting off as enemies. Okay. Enemies have to start as enemies with a common goal. Then comes the decorum of trust. From trust comes respect. From respect comes friendship. From friendship comes love. That's your structure of enemies to lovers. Okay. Ways to keep couples apart: protection. He can't be with her because she's a human and the wolves will not accept her, or or he's an alpha, and by being with her, he's putting a target on her. Um, Kidnapping, she gets kidnapped or he gets kidnapped, but that keeps them apart. Maybe magic keeps them apart. Like in terms of like the magic, there's laws that are established, or even they have different types of magic, so they're not compatible. Missions or jobs. So like if you're writing an urban fantasy and you're writing an assassin, and they both have missions that are separate. Okay, but what happens after they get together? Oh, we'll talk about this. So let's say they have their established romantic monogamous relationship. Okay. First, one of the rules I always live by is never go backwards with your characters. Okay. If your character has learned to accept magic in book three, she can't hate magic in book four for the sake of the plot. Which is why, for me, once my characters are together, they aren't going to break up unless they are forced to. For one, they both realize there's a risk here. They have something to lose. This might mean they have to shift how they fight and who they pick battles with in order to protect their loved one. Okay, so your characters need to grow together once they have that couple. For example, in my cozy mystery series, the characters get together in book five. However, in book six, they need to work together on a case. Even though they've worked together before, it's different because now they're a couple. So when my heroine's ex needs help with the case, they need to work through those trust issues of, does she still have these feelings for him? Because he clearly has feelings for her. The ex has clear, feelings for her. And my hero detective, he stayed away from relationships because he doesn't like commitment or obligation or feeling things like he doesn't want to stress out about stuff like this. And he's putting himself in a position where now he is going to stress and now he's going to start questioning, is it worth it? But they resolve it. They come out together as a stronger couple for it. In book seven, his estranged father comes back and wants my heroine to take his case. And my hero wants nothing um, to do with him, and specifically tell her, don't take my dad's case. But she agrees to help the dad because she has such a close relationship with her father that she wants him to have a close relationship with his father as well. So she thinks she's doing something good for him, even if it's contradicting what he wants. So obviously, there are more issues. There are arguments. And I want to stress this, guys, because I think as authors, we kind of are like, oh, that means my characters can't fight anymore. No, they can fight all the time. Like, and we'll get into this. I actually know that I have um, slides that go into this. Okay. So let's say I wrote book eight in that cozy series and my heroine's ex comes back again. If my hero didn't trust her, I'd be going backwards if they're fighting over the same thing, something that they've already established. Okay. This isn't to say he has to like the ex. He doesn't have to be on his best behavior around the ex. He doesn't have to even like the ex being there, but his trust in the heroine never wavers. Okay. Issues can stem from family, friends, exes, work people, jobs, potential love rivals, money, respect, etc. Okay. Unless your characters are young adults, and even then, readers can be unforgiving for particularly annoying or stupid young adult characters, try to engage in clear communication by the end of the book. I tend to write emotional characters, right? This means miscommunication and reacting instead of calming down. So when I say miscommunication, I'm not saying that they're assuming things. I'm saying they're yelling, and what comes out of their mouth is wrong, right? Um, However, after a cooling off period, my characters always regroup and have an open, honest communication about the issue at hand. Both parties are allowed to present their sides. And even if my characters react to that, they still give each other respect. They grow. And um, I don't even know what I said there, but basically, they just move forward. That's what your takeaway is. So, um, okay. To answer the question, the way to keep things believable and tense and sexy is to keep readers turning the pages is respect each character and their individual goals and have the characters respect each other and their goals. Have them argue. Have them argue. Just because your characters have it happily ever after, especially like if they're enemies to lovers, does not mean they have to stop fighting. Okay. Have them question each other, have them get heated, and have them think about what, from their perspective and their partner's perspective. Realize the other side, apologize if it's required, and have hot, steamy sex. Okay. Okay. So to show this, I'm currently writing book 4 out of 5 in a paranormal fantasy romance. My characters got together in book 3. Okay. Technically, they've hooked up. They didn't actually talk about what they were. They still need to do that. But it's very heavily implied that they care about each other because I've established it's enemies to lovers. And so I've established at the very minimum a friendship, a very strong trust between them. So when they take that romantic step towards each other, afterwards, my heroine's a little bit like, he has this reputation. I'm not sure. My hero's completely crazy about her. Okay. So book 4 resolves a hard cliffhanger that doesn't have to do with their romance, but um, it specifically with my heroine. Something awful happened to her, and she essentially released all of her magic without controlling it. Okay, and that obviously has consequences. So in book 4, she wakes up and she's told that if she uses her magic, there's a chance she could die. Now, she started the series hating magic. In fact, her entire job before was to hunt magic users. She finally accepted, not, you know what I mean, her magic in book 2 and was actively learning to control it in book 3. And not only that, I've kind of personalized the magic. Like her magic wants to protect her. So she thinks of it kind of like this tool that she can utilize to protect her, as well as like a cutlass or a knife, a blade, a dagger, a pistol, that sort of thing. So she feels like this bond with it. Um, she appreciates her magic in book 3, but now um, she's told that all of the work that she put into, so all of those first 3 books, all of that work of putting into loving her magic, accepting her magic, might have to go out the window because there's now a danger to using her magic. So the couple's in a tight spot, right? My hero wants to get this object that will help remove the dark part of her magic from her because he doesn't want her to die. Okay. And he knows that he can't ask her to just, okay, well, just don't use your magic. He knows that he can't. So there's this object that might take out that dark, that dark part of her magic. However, my heroine wants to continue to seek out the consort to one of the gods. It's kind of like this long explanation, but one of the gods has her sister, and it's essentially like Persephone, I won't get into it. Um, my couple now has to figure out what's more important. My hero is going to put her above everyone else, including the heroine's sister. He doesn't care. But the conflict comes in as this: does he have any right to force her to remove something inside of her that could potentially kill her? Because my heroine doesn't want to remove the shadow part of her magic. She wants to learn how to work with it. And my heroine is worried that, or my hero is worried that she's going to die. Like this scares him. So you can see that there is still the couples being together. With couples still being together, they're facing a problem where they don't see eye to eye. And if one of them doesn't bend or compromise, there's a good chance that things could end between the characters because this particular conflict between them has high stakes, right? Now, my readers know me well enough to know that I'm never going to break up my characters. It's very Jane Austen in that they might suffer a little bit, but they're going to get their happy ending. Regardless, the conflict between those 2 characters is real because it keeps it's true to who they are as characters, but it also shows their love for not only each other but for themselves. Okay, they respect each other, even if they disagree. And Jack is not the type of person who is going to just back off because Gwen says to. He respects her having autonomy and choice over herself, but he's also not willing to go down without a fight when she is the most important person to him. Mhm. So you can see kind of something similar in contemporary romance. If one of your characters doesn't want to get married or one of your characters doesn't want to have children, maybe one wants to start a family, the other wants to wait. Maybe one character has to move back to their small town to take care of a sick parent while the other is forced to remain in the city. Maybe your hero is protective over a heroine when it comes to a crappy father, but because he's her father, she still feels this obligation or loyalty to him. There's always going to be conflict between the couple, even if they are together and madly in love. As long as we're not rehashing the same thing over and over again, as long as your characters are growing together and respecting each other, there isn't anything contrived about having conflict. It's completely natural. As usual, keep your genre expectations in mind. Figure out where you're starting the story as a couple and where you want to end as a couple and how you can get there. Last thing, I said this before, I'll say it again. Trust yourself. Know that you are meant to write the story and this romance. Okay. Whether you're a plotter or a pantser or someone in between, know that you know how to tell your story. Remember, your story is essentially like your child. You can get plotting advice from someone like me or someone else, but at the end of the day, only you know what's best for your author brand and the story and your characters. So, if you need more help, you can always purchase a plot from me. Feel free to email me or reach out via Facebook Messenger. Um, Examples of the services I offer are in the announcement section. And if you want to do some more focused coaching, I offer mini group coaching for $25 a month. And essentially, you would be put into a group, um, no more than 4 people, and you'd get about 15 to 20 minutes to discuss whatever issue you're working on with a particular plot, or even if you need help with ideas or tropes, whatever you need. And then one on one coaching is $100 a month on Patreon, and that will give you a full hour to do that. And these are the links that you can check out if you are interested in signing up for this. Um, do we have any questions? So it is totally fine if there's no questions. I'll give it a couple more minutes just to see. I'm happy to answer anything that maybe I wasn't very clear on or that you'd like me to elaborate on, anything like that. I'm honestly not trying to be like awkward or anything like that. But if this is all worked out for you, if this has been helpful, I would just really, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're letting me do this. This is really, really fun. Um, Great. I'm so glad, Laura. I'm so glad that everything seemed to have worked. So, right now, I am going to download this to my computer. And because it's almost 2.5 hours, it's going to be a long one. But if you attended the last series or the last masterclass, I will be getting this up on a private channel on YouTube, and I will be sending out the link as well as the slides um, by the end of the weekend. So, since we're all good with questions, I'm going to end this now. Thank you guys so much again. I really hope that I helped. And again, if you need me at all, feel free to message me or reach out on Facebook. Um, uh, Other than that, I think that that is all I have. So, I'm just going to get out of here. Um, Stop sharing the screen. And yeah, so I hope that everybody has a good weekend and have a good day. All right. Bye, guys.